Okay, this is a commentary on 5 reasons why Afrocentric people are toxic from the black perspective. This is done by a guy named Jabari, and he runs a site called From Nothing. And he tries to break through some of the lies, I guess, that are currently propagated around by a lot of people, including his own people. He starts out, and I'd like to mention that he does show Great Zimbabwe all the time, like it's the only thing that they have. Great Zimbabwe, said by the locals themselves, was built by white men. And so it's kind of odd that he keeps showing that. Sure, black people live around there now, but there's no giant stone structures anywhere that black people have ever built other than this. And it's easy to see that you can't claim that either, especially when the architecture around the top has these pendulums and things that show you it connects to Caucasian architecture and so on. What was it used for? Anyhow, let's go on and let's see what he has to say. He's a nice guy, great mannerisms, even gets called out for not being black enough. All kinds of things. It's disgusting, but let's go through his 5 reasons why Afrocentric people are toxic.
If you are a regular, you probably already know that my agenda with this channel is to spread knowledge of the ignored, neglected, and misunderstood aspects of black culture and history. Not just to black people, but to everyone of every race and from every part of the world. However, there tends to be a toxic trend among many black African enthusiasts, or Afrocentrists, trying to assert outrageous claims towards our people and our history. Unfortunately, comments like these tend to find a home in my comment section every day. These comments do more harm than good, and just make the world and our own people have even less respect for our culture and history.
Well, let's just look at these comments that he gets, because I get comments like this or worse on most of my comments, and you can kind of see why. Here's a man named Mandingo. He says, I'm a black Native American. Well, there's no such thing, so he doesn't exist. But my ancestors are Cherokee and Choctaw. I've never been an African. My people are not from Africa. We are Southern Negroes, which are the real Native American Indians. The white man had us believe that all black people came from Africa, which is BS. The Native Indians was never killed off, great grammar, or have not instinct. In fact, we have here in large numbers that our government and media have kept hidden from the public's eye. No, that's not true. These reservation Indians are half-breeds from the Europeans. So you want to say they're half-breeds from Europeans and Negroids? Because they're not mulattoes. In fact, they don't have Negroid DNA in them. But they changed our history. The real American Indians are black and reddish brown and high yellow, same as Negro. No, there's some Indians that were darker and lighter, and this is from the Caucasian Asian blend that came across the Bering Ice Bridge, and it had nothing to do with Africa. In fact, African Negroids didn't know any other continent really existed until it was showed to them. They don't like that fact, and it's kind of disgusting that they try to make up lies. So then he continues to go, we are not all from Africa. Well, where are you from? This is our land. Oh, so you're trying that I think I'll steal America thing. That's disgusting. He goes on, that's why they try so hard to keep us away from what's rightfully ours and even our real history. No, this is why blacks try so hard to lie and make themselves look pathetic with that lie. It's gotten to be quite disgusting. As far as the Mexicans who believe they came from this land, but they failed to realize that Christopher Columbus never discovered North America. Yeah, he did. Actually, those islands are part of North America. But yeah, he hit those islands first and so on. We're well aware of that. We're also well aware that Leif Erikson came over before then, and there are some controversial stories about other Caucasians that had made it in the past, but not Negroids. They try to pull this Olmec thing, but no, those Olmecs are endemics. I've got videos that show you that they're endemics and not Negroid in any way, shape, or form, but they try to claim that. They also try to claim any other dark-skinned people or anybody that has a tan darker than a Nordic, and it's really gotten quite disgusting. The Mexicans are Spanish, are Spaniard. No, no, they're not. They're part Spanish and part endemic Mexican people. They have an admix just like Negroids do. Yeah, about 20% on y'all. Higher on those, it seems, on average. But blacks weren't in America in any way, shape, or form. Their Indian side is Aztecs, Incas, and Mayans, who never owned this land. If that was the case, they would already be here instead of sneaking over. Well, no, see, there's this blend that runs all the way up through North America, and there was a lot of Indians here. A lot of what took them out was smallpox, and all the Caucasians that showed up in America had already gone through it. The ones that broke out with an epidemic were the Negroids. Once it happened, they put them all on the little islands there that we talked about, and of course they're considered to be holiday islands now and stuff, and vacation islands. But that's where they were kept in quarantine until they had gone through their smallpox. So they literally had to go through it and then have scars on their body and show for a good period of time there, because they were worried it was going to break out with the American public and the Amerindians. Yeah, amazingly, they were worried about them because they didn't want something like that to happen. It would be disgusting to show up and sneeze and have everybody die. Well, people wanted to believe that it was white people that came and sneezed and everybody died, and it looks like the epidemic that broke out wasn't from the Caucasians necessarily that did this, and so on. And really, in reality, past the Mississippi, it strained through there so quickly that we hardly got to meet most of the Indians that would have been here in the Americas. They weren't one people either. There was no unity. It's kind of like Africa, where tribes even fight each other just miles apart and so on. There's no unity whatsoever. And the same thing with the Indians, and the Indians showing you that they were high yellow and all these different colors and a lot of variations. And when you look at pictures, nobody hardly looks like the guy on the wooden nickel or on the nickel that we have and everything. They have a lot of variations from being in one side or the other, and just a lot of variations on a theme, showing you that they themselves were not one cohesive unit. Just like blacks in Africa with Khoisan, Ivory Coast type people, the people that are around over near Ethiopia and the Horn, who aren't even related to them, and so on. So let's just continue and let us go.
Make channels like mine, which actually bear factual information, less credible, especially to random viewers who come here seeking knowledge. These unfortunate people are so shrouded with pseudo-historic, Afrocentric information that they end up very confused and don't even know what to believe anymore. From claiming the history of other cultures to treating the Bible as a black history book, I'm going to cover the top 5 things that annoy me the most about Afrocentric people.
Okay, let's go.
Number 5.
Working our way down.
Acting as if there's a global conspiracy to hide our history while making up their own truth without any references. Don't get me wrong, I know that at one point in history, white people viewed blacks as inferior and subhuman, and unfortunately, some still do to this day.
Oh, I'd like to mention that they like to show this and stuff, but really, KKK was started, it seems, if you track it back down, to actually white men trying to stop a Jewish man from trying to pay his way out of a raping and killing a girl. And it also spurned before then. But back then they had circuit judges, and it took forever for them to get around and so on like that, and people were enraged. And so things like lynchings and things happened. Now, did all of white people wear these hoods and do these things? Oh, hell no. There was, a few thousand of them. I don't know how many it adds out, but if you have millions of Americans and then some people doing this, well, these people took justice upon their own hands in some way, because there was so much crime caused by black men killing and raping people, ripping their clothes off of them and putting it on them. Things like that. They would find them with other people's clothes on that were verified as other people's. People had labels on their stuff and things too. They found a dead man, then they found a black man wearing his clothes, and they were wondering what the hell's going on there. That's not all. Not every single case was exactly like that. Do we have a verified case where the black man didn't do nothing, but then he got killed anyhow or anything? No, I don't think we do have many of those. It's hard to prove anything back then, but there were a lot of lynchings and stuff that went on, and it was due to crime and problems created in America by a culture that was allowed to be free in America and then not try to act like Americans and trying to ruin it from inside. And so some type of structure was tried to imply that they had to conform more. Now, this was a radical group that didn't have anything to do with that concept, but yet they took it upon their own hands to have that under their concept. Strangely, the people that brought the Negroids over ended up infiltrating this concept right here, and by being hidden, the people with the Jewish slave masters book infiltrated that. In fact, if once you look through it, you can find out that once one of them was found out, he killed himself and all these type of things because they didn't want to be known or associated with what they had done. KKK is totally different nowadays than it was at one time, but then again, the culture they're around and dealing with is also a totally different time and a different place. But the current KKK is Negroids. The current neo-Nazis are Negroids. And let me start by saying not all. I mean, there are a lot of great black people that are out there, and I'm sure most of those don't rely on these lies, believe in them in any way, shape, or form, and actually feel their own people are disgusting for doing such. Let's continue.
Back during the days of extreme racism, we weren't even considered human beings. And this was actually used as a justification for enslaving us and treating us as second-class citizens.
Okay, I got to touch upon this. That's true, yeah, and what they're showing here is an old picture. They don't have the names below it, but I think we can tell this is a Negro, this is a European or a white, and this was what they drew of a person that looked like he was Irish. Really kind of an incorrect statement thing, but they actually used the same concept of not even skin color or anything to oppress the Irish. The Irish were the first slaves in America, and at one time there were 6 times more Irish than any blacks in America. It was all chattel slavery until it reached a certain point where a black man who was previously freed and owning land owned his own slaves and tried to get, and once the 7 years was up, you have to be let loose, and he decided he would go to court and try to make John Casor lifetime slavery because his premise, I believe, if you look into it, was that black people weren't sold under the same chattel slavery idea, that they were sold off as a commodity, just like a beer or a thing of wine or a handful of beads. And he won, and he got to keep his slaves so jealously, and then in doing so he ended up making a statute where black people weren't considered to be really human at one time. Well, whenever we look at human was described by white people as a certain thing, and then there were juveniles, or not juveniles, but primitives that were all over that were considered not to be of that race. Now, you look into the Bible, and it talks about this Adamic race was built up to help do everything. And then if we look over a history of time, those people went around and helped civilize the rest of the world. So it almost goes hand in hand some kind of strange way. But let's just continue with what he has to say about this.
Even the scientific community did their best to reinforce these beliefs, and archaeologists would literally destroy real and true relics of our history, including ruins, artifacts, and manuscripts. With that being said, this isn't really to say that there aren't aspects of our history that have been destroyed or hidden, but in this day and age, with equality among all races and access to information literally in the palm of our hands, these things simply don't happen anymore. One can easily travel to any part of the world, access any information they'd like, and create videos, movies, and documentaries about anything their heart desires.
And we go into this third world country here, and these people living like this, and yet you look, and he's got a newfangled wristwatch on, even though he's got his old school classic on. Isn't that, it's kind of funny, and right in the middle of them trying to do their old ceremony, doodle-doodle, somebody's phone goes off. Anyhow, let's go.
Not only that, but there's simply no proof or evidence that our history is still being deliberately hidden or erased.
Of course not.
Granted, I do.
You hide your own history because you don't want to go with it. You want to try to steal other people's history. This is what's definitely happening. You can look on my videos and they go through and try to tell you they were the Egyptians, they were the Moors, they were the people of the Bible, all kinds of stuff, but none of them say they were West African primitives that were illiterate, that didn't have anything going on. They don't want to say that. Well, was it nothing going on? Oh, well, no, it wasn't like they were just sitting there. But comparative wise to the rest of the world, just like we look at Amerindians and say when we showed up they were far less advanced, we have that with Negroids too. But let's continue.
agree that it needs more presence in the media, but there is nothing inherently holding us back from sharing our history, other than our.
You don't want to put it out in the media, I don't think. If there was to be a good show on that pretty much America had to watch, like Roots, which was actually a stolen white plagiarized thing too. The whole Kunta Kinte thing and everything was all made up. It's been well documented and proved. In fact, he had to pay royalties and stuff for the man he stole the thing from the book from places, themes, names, the whole 9 yards. But the oddity here is that they don't want for there to be a video to come out that'll actually say West African primitives are West African primitives, not a part of the Bible or any religion like that, though they can adopt it. They weren't a portion of that. That's all talking about Caucasians that came out of a boat in the Caucasus Mountains and how they heralded mankind in that area. And at that time, they didn't even really know sub-Saharan Africans existed. And in the exact same breath, sub-Saharan Africans didn't know the rest of the world existed and all the neat things that had happened. They see them now, and out of jealousy, they make up lies about it. But if we were to have a TV show that showed this truth, black people would try to lose their mind. Well, the portion that thinks all these lies would lose their mind. The other ones would be like, yay, now we can finally get somewhere if these people will pay attention. A lot of people won't want to do this, though, because they just know it will turn into a race war. Why? Because blacks can't control their own emotions and they go crazy and they want this lie. Well, somehow, some way, this has to come out. And I guess that's part of why my videos come out too. If you get on my site and you start spreading lies whenever I'm trying to spread truth, then I'm going to debunk your lie. It's going to happen. You don't get on my site and start talking crap and stuff. It's pretty disgusting for you to think that it's your free open market to do so. I have trolls now that have all these clip and paste things that they get on every one of my videos and try to put it on every single thread and hop up and down mad. It's real disgusting. And it's done by their own hands. Yes, it is. Let's go.
Souls, and making excuses or inventing our history is not going to solve the problem.
No, it won't.
Number 4. Using the Bible and religion as a tool to validate our history. This one in particular is one of the worst.
Yeah, it is.
The main reason being that the Bible and the Christian religion aren't even of African origin. Christianity began in the Middle East and spread throughout Europe and parts of North Africa and Ethiopia. Our ancestors do not hail from any of those regions. Most American blacks can trace their ancestry from Western and Central Africa, more specifically places like Nigeria, Ghana, Ivory Coast, Mali, Benin, and Congo.
All right over here.
Before European contact, the overwhelming majority of people in these regions practiced their own traditional religions, such as Vodun and Orisha worship, and in some areas they were Islamic. However, none of them were Christian until Europeans arrived.
Some of them were Islamic. Well, anywhere there was an Islamic slave trade. The Islamic slave trade started 900 years before the Americas were even found. The only problem with their dissension from that point, is that they castrated most of the males as eunuchs and stuff due to their penchant for trying to rape women and so on, and it really got out of hand. So in a way to calm them down and try to make them more usable and stuff, they would do that. If you look at some of their slaves accounts, it's quite disgusting. They would just dispose of them after usage because they didn't want to house them or feed them anymore and things like that. So they were just utilized in that way. People don't even try to look at that moment, though, in any all. It's all white guilt about America somehow. It's kind of disgusting whenever only some 6% of the Negroid population came to the Americas and 92% went to South America, of course. Also, if you look there, though, there's a small contingent too. Why? I believe those were also mainly castrated in the same way and made into eunuchs and stuff. The people that did not do such a thing and thought it was a gross negligence to any humanity were the Caucasians of North America. And so because of that fact, now we have a large contingent of blacks in America. And hey, that's okay. I don't want to be castrated. I don't think anybody would want to be castrated in any way, shape, or form. If they felt like they were uncontrollable, then maybe they would. It'd be hard to get somebody to admit they were uncontrollable. But regardless of that fact, the Bible doesn't have anything to do even with Ethiopians. The Ethiopians were one of the first people to adopt the Bible, but that doesn't mean that they were part of the Bible. The current makeup of Ethiopia, which by the way is not the Ethiopia that's mentioned in the Bible or the Greeks that made up the word. For if you look up the Greek origin of the word and wiki it, it'll show you a map that'll show you all these brown places that they all called Ethiopians at the time, and it has nothing to do with Negroids. I have a big problem with that whenever I showed a video about that, though. They hop up and down, and most of these are West African people, so they're not even related to the Ethiopians, but they want to hop up and down and mad. Then they want to say Ethiopians were the Egyptians, therefore West Africans were the Egyptians. It's gotten to where it's just pretty disgusting, and then the logic formed.
The only part of Africa that was Christian by the time of European arrival was Ethiopia, which are not related to American blacks whatsoever.
Right.
To make matters worse, Christianity was used as a tool to force slaves to think that they were being saved by white men and to make them into passive subordinates. Sadly,
well, you could look at it that way in some accounts easily. If we figured out that blacks were capturing and selling their own people, and there was a large amount of cannibalism going on and things like that that were over there, you would think that every black person that you took to the new world here, that you were in some way saving from that fact, and that you could take them into a brave new world, that they could have something to do that wouldn't be what Africa is. Just a moment, if you can do this in your mind, imagine there are no Negroids in America whatsoever, that the Jewish slave master didn't make that what we all consider to be a mistake now, and blacks were never taken to the Americas. Okay, now, where would blacks be in the world today? Well, without the Caucasian intervention that's in Africa and all the colonialization, just like the places that aren't colonized, you would find a very, very primitive people that don't know who God is, of the white Caucasian Bible and all of its things. And people want to look at nowadays to where, okay, well, that means God of the whole world. And so now we're going to embrace it and say that all other religions are wrong, but this one is right. Well, that's a hard thing to pull off. Let's just say everybody else has different religions, and this is a Caucasian religion that always had to do with Caucasians. If you look up the definition of Hamites, which blacks try to put themselves under, Hamites are Caucasian, a division of the Caucasian race, and in that definition it talks about Egypt and so on too. Whenever you look up Caucasian race, it shows you they're all endemic to North America, all the way around the entire Mediterranean, Egypt, and the Horn of Africa, even in elder times. So it might give you an idea of where that admix comes to those Ethiopians. But then over and above that, they were also everywhere in Europe, across Russia, all the way to China with Proto-Indo-Europeans, which they had, yin and yang symbols and stuff I've shown recently. They helped to bring more civilization, if you will, to China, although that's looked at as being, you can find pyramids and things there too that are hidden somewhat. And around those pyramids there are Caucasians with blonde hair and things that are buried right there. Yeah, we've sent them around, Terran Basin mummies and all kinds of things. But then it goes down into India, and India also got their crap together along with Aryans helping them out back in the old days. It actually happened twice, and then a third time with the British coming in, and they try to deny a few of those if they can, but and I guess it's out of self-pride, but the India people are a proud people and a great people, and everybody needs help from time to time. In America, we need help from all the Americans that hate America, because you shouldn't hate where you live. And if you don't like what's going on, you should either go back to Africa or stop being that way and then try to do something for the nation you live in. For all you're doing now is ruining everything because you're mad it's not about you. And it's not going to be about you. And in fact, this generation, next generation, thousands of generations from now, it'll never be about you. Oh, white people are losing, they're going to all go away. Oh, that's your dream. That's your dream, as you're some 13-12% of America. It's kind of disgusting that you even keep hopping up and down and touting this like it's some great boon, that the spacemen of the world that have led all humanity are now quitting having so many kids. Because if you'll look in the last 20-30 years, we've realized that we're overpopulating the world and causing a lot of pollution and problems, and you don't need to have 8 or 9 kids and things like that. And they're having correct families. In a new modern family, you'll find something like people are actually waiting to have children. It's not the accident that happens and then the man runs away and leaves a unwed mother and things. No, but they actually are falling in love with a woman and then waiting to have children until they've got everything set up to where they could do such a thing. It's kind of a different mentality rather than just the hump it and I don't care. situation too, which goes on quite a bit in the black community. 77% of black families are single parents right now, and it was 74 and it went up to 77 just in the last few years, and it keeps going up and up and up, and it's not going to be blamed on white people either. This is a cultural problem with people from Africa. They didn't really have a marriage type thing and stuff going on. It really wasn't the same type deal, and to live under white ideals and all the concepts we have has really warped their minds somewhat into where they think some of that was theirs and some of this is, oh, and you stole everything from us. And it's like, man, you didn't have much. We didn't steal anything from anybody. In fact, all of that slavery thing was actual, back then, totally legal. And they paid them beads and they gave them people. Yeah, and their own people were capturing and selling their own people. So to look at this in any type of foolish way is foolish. Let's continue.
This lingers on to this day, and most blacks are Christians simply because they are raised to be God-fearing, and if they deviate away from this at all, they'll risk burning in hell. So they really believe what they believe simply out of fear of not believing it.
That's the way a lot of Christians are. A lot of Christians are kind of snowblind right now to this exact fact, and so what, they say, hey, if you deny God, then all this will happen and everything, and so the fear of God has gotten people to be complacent to the idea of the Bible. It's the way it was engineered and written to do. We nowadays realize that it had a lot of Roman influence, Greek and Roman influence into it, and it shows you these people that were trying to help control the Levant area because they were problematic. They kept causing problems with the whole area. In fact, if we don't realize that, you can see to this day there are still problems in that area. Let's continue.
On top of all that, Christianity is a religion. It's not a history book.
Nope.
Sure, the Bible contains some references to historical events,
yes,
but it is not a textbook.
Nope.
It is a religious manuscript.
Right.
If you are taking talking snakes and men who walk on water as fact, that's your own choice, and I respect your decision, but you can't expect to force these facts or opinions on anyone.
Agreed.
Nor can you use this as a credible source of information to validate our history.
Right.
Especially considering it wasn't even written by Africans.
And it's not about Africans, and Negroids aren't mentioned in the Bible really ever at all. It does talk about an Ethiopian king, but whenever it talks about these things, it doesn't say those are biblical people either. And when it talks about Ethiopia, again, that's going to be that Greek Ethiopian thing. And they try to say now that Christ wasn't black, that he was Middle Eastern. That's still a Caucasian, but Christ was a Galatian or Gala priest. Gala means milk. The man was pale. The descriptions and things that are given of a lot of the biblical people are pale, of course, because these were all Caucasians of the Bible. And blacks want to interject themselves into a religion that they feel left out on because they're in a white America that has this religion. And they're a small minority, so they want to be part of your religion. And in doing so, they're trying to ruin it all. And it's gotten past disgusting. Let's continue.
Number 3.
Aha.
Acting as though Egypt and Nubia are the only parts of African history worth mentioning.
Yeah.
People talk about Egypt a lot in my videos. When people want to reinforce that Africans do have history, regardless if they're black or white, Egypt is usually the only thing they mention.
Yeah, it really does. And just because Egypt is in the corner of Africa, attached to the Mediterranean and all the endemic Caucasians there, doesn't mean that it was Negroids in any way, and Nubians were never considered to be Egyptians in any way, shape, or form. In fact, if you look at what was said about them, it was quite disgusting. They called them troglodytes and things, and then later they ended up domesticating them somewhat. We look at that situation in America too, and there's a problem also. So let's continue.
Because Egypt is in Africa does not mean that it's part of our history.
No, it's
Nor
not.
is it the only African history worth mentioning. You have to remember, guys, Africa is a huge continent with over 1 billion people. Looking at
gigantic. You can literally, if you squished up or chunked it into pieces, fit 3 Americas inside of Africa. It's huge. It's huge. And to say that this boundary of the Sahara did not keep these primitives over here that nobody knew about from getting over here and being the white people that caused everything in all of North Africa is kind of disgusting. And by kind of, I mean a lot. But also they didn't know the Khoisan existed. Right, yeah, and the Horners didn't know that the Khoisan existed, and the Khoisan didn't know they existed. Well, did they run into each other from time to time? Oh, sure, the Bantu expansion shoved the Khoisan down, so they definitely met each other. This didn't work out too good for a lot of Khoisan, didn't work out too good for a lot of the pygmy Negroids and other Negroids that we might not even never know now that ever existed and got swallowed up by other Negroid tribes, no pun intended. Let's go.
Egypt as a source of your history would be no different than a Portuguese man looking at Russian history as his own. It's simply
Let's get that example here straight. You have as much connection to Egypt as a Portuguese would have to far Russia. Let's continue.
doesn't make any sense. It
No,
also serves to reinforce the false belief that Africa south of the Sahara has no history worth mentioning.
Africa south of the Sahara has history worth mentioning in some way, shape, or form. Here's where doctors come into the village. And look, somebody brought a boombox and gave it to these kids. That's not Negro technology. Is a soccer ball Negro technology? No. How about the sandals they're wearing? Probably not. How about all this clothes that's been given to them by Caucasians that see the TV shows that for a few dollars you can help out this child and stuff like that? But of course, billions have been spent by whites. How much has been spent by blacks? How much have blacks gone back and helped their own people? Well, actually, they just want to deny it and make that go away. They want to make sure you think that they're not these people, that they were the Egyptians. And that's past disgusting. Let's continue.
There's this image that Africa outside of Egypt was one of the tribes and villages, when in reality, it was riddled with many civilizations, cities, and kingdoms.
It was actually pretty much tribes and so on like that, and the great Zulu nations and everything. And then he says cities. Then he tries to show you Great Zimbabwe again. And again, Great Zimbabwe doesn't have anything to do with Negroids. Did they get their crap together at certain times? Sure they did. Most of those places are ruins now. Did they ever keep it together? No, they didn't keep it together because a lot of other black people and all the other problems that goes along with it. Again, there was no unity to it whatsoever. But yeah, there's a lot of culture in sub-Saharan Africa that you could embrace. Please stop embracing the Caucasian culture and lying about your own history. It's past disgusting.
Which, by the way, if you would like to see a few examples of this, check out my Cities Built by Africans series, which I'll leave links to at the end of this video.
I think I may have done a video on that already, and it discounts pretty much all of them, and it shows you how they started with an influx. Where did they get the idea of cities to build, to do walls, to do all these things that they never did before? And that was from influx and contact. We're not going to pretend that they came up with it on their own whenever the dating on these sites show you that they didn't. Let's continue.
Africa is the second largest landmass in the world,
Huge.
And it boggles my mind how people can be so fixated on Egypt and Nubia to a lesser extent that they totally neglect the rest of the continent.
Yeah, Egypt and Nubia to a lesser extent. Why? Well, because if you look it up, Nubians weren't the Egyptians and all that, and so it all falls apart. So then they just want to claim the Caucasian Egyptians, which have pale women and red ochre men. Well, so those are Negroid men and white women? No, that's your dream again, which is a warped mind situation where you don't want to be with your own kind. But the problem is Caucasian Egyptians had red ochre and pale women. Well, who else did? Well, the Greeks. All over their vases, you can see Greeks with reddish men and pale women. You can see it in the Mitanni. You can see it in Etruscans, Minoans, all over the whole area of Caucasians. They all drew this same symbology where a male is red ochre colored. It actually goes back to caveman burials and stuff, and red ochre symbology and all the cave art that we found and everything. And of course, none of that is Negroid cave art either. They were really in a smaller area of West Africa and not in these other places. Please quit trying to put yourself in them. To the rest of the world, you just look like pathetic, grasping people that are lying and then want everybody to try to believe a lie that you believe. Let's continue.
You people need to wake up and do some research on the millions of square miles of land located south of Egypt.
Yes, please
which is
do.
home to many other
unique and impressive civilizations. Look, here we have some pygmies that are in with this group, but where do you think they got a horse from? Just a thought. Where do you think they got a horse from and an idea to have a pointy hat? For horses aren't endemic to Africa, neither are any of the cattle in any way, shape, or form, nor the grains and stuff that are used there. And if you say no to Africa, no, I'm talking about Egypt. Egypt that got their grains and stuff came from Sumeria and so on. That cattle come from other places. They worked off the Nile, and and that influx of having that Sumerian grain and things enabled Egypt in the first place. And then later, the Hyksos and people that had brought horses there enabled them to have an advantage with chariots and things like that, so the legacy could continue on. If those two things weren't met, then we wouldn't even be talking about it now. And that was all done from primordial Caucasians too. Look at the Sumerians and their blue eyes and so on. And of course now we know the Sumerians predate them, and then it goes all the way back, Kamyana Mohila, 22,000 BC. But Göbekli Tepe at 9600 BC or so, Catalhoyuk, and all these regions of Europe that were occupied by Caucasians. And during the last ice age, everybody was shoved down more into the Middle East. And so it's a rational, easy understanding to realize that the people that used to be in the Middle East went north. Did they go south? No. They went north. Let's continue.
The ancient civilizations. Number 2. Trying to steal the history of others.
Wow, here we go.
Simply put, stop trying to steal history from other people. That is one of the most disgusting things you can possibly do.
Yes.
One big gripe from these extreme Afrocentrics is that the white man stole our history.
Oh, yeah.
Well, you know what? You are not doing any better by trying to steal other people's history, are you?
In fact, it would be a worse situation where if you think it was bad that it happened in the past, why try to do it today to justify some type of lie? Like he said, disgusting's a good word to put on it.
Wrongs don't make a right.
Two wrongs don't make a right.
There are many Afrocentric people out there who try to claim that Africans created every major civilization on Earth.
Yeah.
Native Americans were copper-toned, straight, black-haired Mongoloids who inhabited the American continents. They grew and developed several different civilizations all throughout these lands, ranging from stone tool-using hunter-gatherer cultures to Bronze Age kingdoms who built cities of stone. They are distinct people with their own unique languages, cultures, traditions, and physical characteristics, none of which equate to Africans.
And please quit claiming that Native Americans are Negroids. It's disgusting. Enough has happened to these Amerindians to where we shouldn't have something like this going on, where black people are trying to claim that they were somehow the Amerindians.
I don't care what Ivan Sertima said in his book. Although interesting, he has no archaeological evidence to back his claims, just theories and observations.
Yes, I want him to say that one more time clearly to you, that Ivan Sertima has been totally debunked on all of his thoughts.
Traditions and physical characteristics, none of which equate to Africans. I don't care what Ivan Sertima said in his book. Although interesting, he has no archaeological evidence to back his claims, just theories and observations.
And it's been actually totally debunked over and over again repeatedly, and it's kind of sad that people still try to use his words to justify some type of lie, like this was the truth when it's already been debunked. So if you're trying to rely on a debunk, then you're even more pathetic than you thought you were. Let's continue.
Statues and dolls that have curly hair do not automatically mean that the civilization has African origins.
Of course not.
Then there are the dark-skinned peoples in other parts of the world, such as Australian Aboriginals and Polynesians, who people claim were of African descent.
No, they're not.
Newsflash, these features can all be explained by climate. It is common knowledge that hot and tropical areas with more sun generally have darker-skinned people, a genetic adaptation to protect their bodies from harmful UV rays.
Yes, and Caucasians have this same effect where they have this magic adaptable melanin, where if you have somebody living down on the coast, maybe like Florida or something, and they go to the beach a lot, they're going to be quite the tanned person. And it's funny that today in a lot of my videos, they tell you that white people can't stand out in the sun, that they'll catch fire like some kind of vampire. It's really gotten to be quite disgusting. These black people come up with all this yap. It's quite disgusting. I think I've said disgusting enough. Let's go.
This is why Australia has the highest rate of skin cancer in the world. Its native people were dark-skinned, whereas its conquerors are fair-skinned. Genetically, culturally, and linguistically, natives of these regions are more similar to Southeast Asians than Africans. And just because their skin is the same color as ours does not mean we are the same people.
Right.
If that logic made any sense, then that would mean that Latinos and Arabs are related just because they have similar features.
Do you see the ironic stupidity whenever something like that is shown directly to you? If I told you that this is not an Arab man in any way, shape, or form, this is a Mexican man dressed up as an Arab for Christmas. Now look at him. Yeah, so you can see how black people might try to make that connection, but that connection's been destroyed long ago, but they still try to grab at it rather than realizing that it looks pathetic to everybody when you do it. You're a West African primitive and didn't know the rest of the world existed. Oh, that's such a bad position. I'm sorry your bad position, but let's be real and truth about things. Let's not lie. Lying and hate causes lying and hate. Let's continue.
In extreme cases, some Afrocentric people even try to take credit for every single major civilization, from Chinese to Romans, from Aztecs to Inca, from Egyptians to Persians. They try to claim
Oh, they try to claim everything. They try to act like it was all them and somehow it got taken away. It's disgusting. One of the worst ones of this is Clyde Winters, who is totally debunked and even at one time had a medical clinical mental problem that they diagnosed onto him and wouldn't let him be part of the police force there. I believe it was in New York and stuff. There's a lot that's about him. So now he goes around spreading Negrocentric lies. One of the neat ones I've got loaded up here. Let me just do this for you real quick. That I've got loaded up here, but I have not done a video on yet. But it's right here at the first edge here. The Hyksos, the first Kushite dynasty. It's this one right here. You're probably not even seeing the top quite into it. But this is where Clyde Winters tried to say the pale Hyksos people that a lot of Negroids say, oh, look, there's where Whitey showed up there. He actually tries to claim Whitey is Negroids, the Hyksos were, and then he tries to say that that's Kushites. Then he tries to say Kushites were Negroids, and all this other stuff and put it together. And by disgusting, I mean big time disgusting and sad. And there's black people that are trying to believe this and get all mad about it too. It's where blacks are just deluded. They have no clue what's going on, and they'd rather grip at lies than any truth whatsoever. If you say that they were from West Africa, a lot of them deny it. Let's continue.
that black people brought civilization to the entire world. If any of this stuff at all were true, from Native Americans being black to blacks being the fathers of all world civilization, the evidence should be slapping us in the face. Be proud of your own history and do some research before sweeping it under the rug and trying to claim someone else's as your own.
Good point.
Number 1. Fighting racism with racism.
That ain't gonna work.
People who do any and everything they can to prove that white people are evil, primitive, barbaric, or uncivilized, and that we somehow saved them from their lives of savagery. Remember what I said about 2 wrongs don't make a right? Just like stealing history from others is wrong, racism is also wrong. Being a victim of it does not justify doing it to others.
Oh, there's a big point that's right there. Another good big point is that whites are propped up in America. They're given all kinds of advantages, affirmative action and stuff in school because of a lower IQ on average than most people. They've in fact even lowered the IQ rate where it says that you're a mental deficient just because a lot of black people were showing up under that number. And that's people that are in America raised up in Caucasian schools getting to learn exactly the same word for word getting taught as the white people are. The people in Africa that are running around in a bush would not have the IQ of the people that are running around here either. Yeah, so let's continue.
However, when it comes to these bigoted people, their primary agenda is to spread hatred towards whites and prove to the world that they are terrible human beings or monstrous entities.
Yes.
Sure, what
They want to mention that the spaceman is bad, that brought all humanity and made all the modern medicines and everything. They're bad, but whites are great people with their 54% crime. Well, so it's just a little more than half. You're only 12% of the population, and because males are doing most of this, about 6% of the population is causing 54% of the crime in America. A weird statistic is let's look at rape, where in 1 year, now this may be the worst year looking at it in variation, but 37,000 white women were raped by other ethnicities. 10 black women were raped by non-black men in 1 year. 37,000. This equates to white people getting raped 100 times a day in America on average from black people. Do anybody see that as being a problem? Is it anything that should be considered to be normalized? Should someone try to stop themselves and other people stop them from trying to do such disgusting things? Well, if they try, they're racists? Or is the black rapist a racist? Let's continue.
whites don't have the best track record when it comes to racism, genocide, or conquest. And in fact, they're probably responsible for the most mass deaths in all of human history. However, it wasn't their skin that did any of that. It was their civilizations and their cultures. It wasn't some collective 100% anti-colored, all-white effort that did it. Every
No, and 98% of that number that you're going to try to come out with were whites fighting other whites. Yeah, there's this story, and I've done a video about it, but I haven't done a full one. It works with Conan and all these other things, where the snake in an old symbology slowly grows long enough to bite its own tail. And what happened to Caucasians in taking over the world is that they came around and started biting their own tail. Caucasians fighting themselves through wars and so on. Had nothing to do with Negroids whatsoever. I wonder how many Negroids killed over how many millions of Negroids and shipped off how many millions of Negroids as unwanted for beads and alcohol, like a drive-through slave mart. But that's all cool. That's fantastic. White man bad. White man that's saving all of Africa and feeding them for billions of dollars and stuff, and all the aid that's done, all that's just swept under. One time you took my great grandma, and it's like, really, your great 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 granddad's somebody related to him sold her. Let's not act like you're just innocent here in any way, shape, or form, or that blacks were some kind of like hippie culture running around trying to give flowers to people. Right.
human being is unique, and it's okay to hate the racists, but don't hate the race.
Ah, this is the important, probably the most important statement that he says right there. It's okay to hate racists, just don't hate the race. Yeah, don't hate the Caucasian race because they led mankind. That would be